As fun as it is to keep up with all the brand new anime, you just can't beat watching the classics. Anime that have survived the test of time, shows and movies that still hold up today. Sometimes years will go by before we get something that will really cement itself as a classic, but when they do come around, they're fantastic. Something that can not only innovate and impress in its own time but maintain a status of greatness after decades is fascinating to me. A piece of work really needs to be incredible to do this, but it's often hard to sift through decades of titles to find classics, so in this video I'm going to list 10 must-watch classics from the medium. To avoid repetition, I'll be leaving out titles that I've mentioned in recent videos. Although absolute classics and must-watch titles, I won't bother talking about anime such as Ghost in the Shell, Akira or Evangelion. So where better to start than one of my personal favourites and possibly the best from this era, Macross. Back in the late 70s and early 80s, we saw a boom in the popularity of shows like Macross. Long-running space operas or mecha shows were broadcast to a wide audience, even spreading over into the West. Unfortunately, this trend didn't create the right environment for quality. The majority of the shows created at the time were just additional content for another product, maybe a toy or a video game. So we have a lot of content but not a lot of quality. Many of the shows didn't even reach their conclusion as there was just no need. A lot of the anime this era produced was just left behind, buried in the heap of poorly made mecha series. But Macross stood out from the bunch and managed to surpass its time. Although the animation hasn't aged as well, it's still to this day one of the best written additions to the genre. They mixed the usual space war storyline with a deeper, character-focused emotional story, completely unconventional and refreshing. This made Macross into more than just another mecha series. It cemented itself as one of the best in the genre for over 30 years now. Neo Tokyo was released back in 1987. It's a collection of short films directed by Rintaro, Yoshiaki Kawajiri and Katsuhiro Otomo. They're all fantastically imaginative works that styles and themes are instantly recognisable in later titles. You can see a bit of everything from the next 2 decades of anime here, both narratively and stylistically. They all offer their own individual style, some being dark and gritty and some being cartoonish. Either way, they mark a fantastic point in anime and in the directors' careers. Each film is under 20 minutes, so there's no excuse to give this one a miss. Armoured Trooper VOTOMS is as badass as it sounds. It's a slightly underappreciated mecha series from the 80s, but it's by far one of the most unique mecha series I've seen. It has all the awesome sci-fi elements you'll love with an extra hint of realism. I'm adding this onto my list because it's such an awesome take on the genre, with a really fantastic classic feel. Imaginative visuals and a really fun cast, VOTOMS is a real classic. Perfect Blue was released in 1997 and has had massive influence on film and anime. Not only was it one of the most unique psychological anime films out there, but it kickstarted the career of Satoshi Kon, who we all know went on to create even more classics. Few films have come close to matching Perfect Blue's character study, and some of the best written characters still remain in this movie. A really fantastic and unique approach to the subject. Mobile Suit Gundam sits in a similar position to Macross. Although I don't think it achieves the same level of narrative success, it still manages to stay fairly relevant through the years. It's even more impressive when you consider the rocky start the franchise had. Originally created in 1979, it met with very little success and was actually cancelled. Despite this early wobble, it managed to not completely die and was resurrected many years later when a range of Gundam toys became quite successful. Since then, it's gone on to create one of the most successful and universally recognisable brands in anime. Megazone 23 is quite possibly the coolest thing to come out of Japan. It's absolutely jam-packed with everything that makes 80s anime awesome. It's got brilliant character designs, an epic cyberpunk world, a crazy plot, and of course, motorbikes. Similar to many of the other additions to this list, you'll almost immediately see the influence Megazone 23 has had on the anime that followed it. The animation has a fantastic classic look and still holds up today. The sci-fi story definitely itches that scratch that we're missing these days, and the characters have that cheeky charm that brings a really dynamic and interesting drama. Without a doubt, a real classic. Patlabor can be a daunting franchise to watch. There's a lot of different editions from different times with different staff. Although they all have their own reasons to be watched, I'm just going to be talking about Mamoru Oshii's installments. The 7-episode OVA series Early Days and the first 2 movies. I'm doing this because they work nicely as one package, and because they're a massive point in his career. Patlabor to Oshii is very much the godfather to Coppola. It was a success and gave him funding to expand his creative control over future projects. Not only this, but it contains some of his best work. The basic shell of Patlabor allows for the perfect blend of sci-fi and realistic situations, something that lends itself well to Oshii's style. With movie quality animation included, it's become one of my favourites. Cowboy Bebop is arguably the classic. Certainly for us in the West, it's one of the most important series. It came over after its failure in Japan in the early 2000s and was met with a very unexpected response. People loved it, but that wasn't necessarily the already existing anime fans. Bebop captured a more mature audience who'd previously brushed aside the more child-orientated battle shonen. Not only is it incredibly important for us, but it's bloody brilliant. It's one of the best takes on episodic storytelling, creating a completely unique style and atmosphere in every single episode. What I find so compelling about Bebop is its masterful execution of each style. It's not like they just nailed a formula and sprinkled other genres into it, they completely engrossed themselves into other styles perfectly. Cowboy Bebop is a classic that won't be forgotten anytime soon. Great Teacher Onizuka is a real gem that never really gets the credit it deserves, both critically and in its popularity. Sure, the series isn't a pioneer of the medium and there are a number of noticeable problems, but after all these years of watching hundreds of comedy anime, I've watched few that capture the charm and balance as well as Onizuka does. Very rarely does anime get silly comedy right, it always feels repetitive and dull, but that's not the case with Onizuka. The cast, the humour and the cheeky charm of the series all gel together to create a genuinely funny comedy series. When we talk about classic anime, there are few that encapsulate that phrase more than the original space battleship Yamato. It even sounds retro. I normally recommend the remake of this series since it does a fantastic job of modernising the title, but since we're talking specifically about classics, the original is completely necessary. So we all love classic anime, but what are some of your favourites that I didn't mention in the list? Go ahead and post them in the comments. There are decades and decades of hidden gems and influential series out there, the list could go on forever, but these 10 are a start. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button and share it around with your friends. You can watch more videos by clicking on the screen and subscribing. Thank you very much for watching the video.